Okay, so we will be recording this session and it will be available to all who have attended or registered. So again, welcome all today on a Wednesday morning. I am Frank Atlari, Senior Client Manager at Phase Pacific, and this is the first of a series of webinars that we will be running. And today we will be looking at an emerging technology approach that we believe will change the way applications are delivered, and that is platform engineering. So this is part of Phase Pacific's commitment to helping our customers streamline their labs, software development, IT operations. And we are fortunate to have two highly experienced individuals, Jason Lee, Quali VP of Global Sales, and Chris Fox, the Senior DevOps Engineer at Quali. Both have extensive experience in automation, orchestration, and cloud infrastructure. And I have had the pleasure of representing Quali in Australia for over 10 years. And I'm certain you'll enjoy hearing from Jason and from Chris today. So some housekeeping for the day. Firstly, the mics will be on mute. I'll turn the mics on at the end for open questions. However, there is a chat at the bottom. You can enter your questions at any time and we will address those at the end of the session. I will also, open the video in case towards the end if people wish to turn their video on. So without ado, I'm going to hand over to Jason Lee, who will lead the first part of this presentation. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for putting this together. Thanks for everybody for joining. I've taken a real interest in platform engineering and what's happening in the market. There's a lot of buzz, a lot of talk around platform engineering, and it's relatively early on. Gartner's picked this topic up probably about 9 months ago as a category, and it's really starting to take off in terms of growth in the market and solving some real challenges that customers are facing on a daily basis. I've also got with me Chris Fox. He's one of our solution architects, and he will be doing the demo portion of the webinar today. I've got around 10 to 15 minutes that I want to go through kind of just to set this up, talk to you a little bit about what we're seeing in the industry, why this is coming on, talk a little bit about our positioning in that, but want to show really our position through an actual demo and a live demo of our solution, Torque. So I think one of the things that I think we've all experienced, right? If we've been in technology for any period of time, there has been a ton of innovation that's happened in the market over many, many years. Which has been great, and a lot of it is around, how do I accelerate? How do I automate? How do I, make our operations more efficient around infrastructure? And there's all kinds of use cases in this space, whether it's DevOps or development, software development, testing, SREs, that need this infrastructure, need it accessible, need easy access to this. And that's where a lot of these technologies have really come out, whether it's cloud or things like IAC or infrastructure as code, like a Terraform or Helm or Ansible or a Plumi. There's a lot of pieces and parts to really, how do you automate and use the right structure to be able to automate, which is, part of the complexity and really drives, that need for this discussion around platform engineering. And I'll talk about kind of some of the core components of what platform engineering is from an industry perspective, but really the automation, the complexity, the requirements that are out in the market, it's a real challenge for customers. And we see that quite often, getting this right and making sure that you've got a consistent process to be able to deliver this infrastructure to those use cases. And I think that kind of follows on to really this next slide, and it's a logo slide clearly, but if you think about what's happened in the DevOps world, in the DevOps space, right? DevOps has really over the last 7, 8, 10 years is really taken off and really been given a lot of fuel to go innovate and go drive which has created quite a few different types of solutions out there, whether that's repositories like GitHub or pipelines like Jenkins or Circle CI. Really, the kind of the early adopters of cloud was a lot of the DevOps, just getting access to that infrastructure and be able to move as fast as they can. And with that, what we see is that that pendulum of giving all of the leeway, all of the flexibility to the DevOps team to run as fast as they can, right? And creating DevOps teams, development teams, separating out of IT is starting to come back together. And there's that balance between how do you run as fast as you can, but also building quality, building consistency in the approach that you've got it, and quite honestly, costs starting to become a big factor with the economies and all the things that are driving efficiencies in the market. So a lot of tech debt from an infrastructure standpoint. There's a lot of tech debt from a DevOps perspective. There's 110 ways to go skin this cat, but I think that the reality is that the market's really looking for something to bring this together, to really help simplify this from a user perspective, as also from a operations perspective. Some data around what we're seeing in the market is 40% of the developers' times, or 40+% of developers' times, is really managing and maintaining infrastructure, which is a core component of the ability to go execute to their job. Developing software, testing that software, you have to have that infrastructure to be able to go run that. And quite a bit of time is spent on this. And if you look at kind of the different skill sets of individuals across your DevOps organizations or developers organizations, you've got different skill sets. You've got your senior developers, you've got your junior developers, you've got onboarding new developers, and that ramp time and that cognitive load is real, and it's a drag on their ability to go execute from a innovation standpoint. There's other things around security. So security, is clearly an issue that everyone is solving and spending money to make sure that they're doing that. But there's simple things that platform engineering is trying to address in terms of just your footprint in the cloud, right? There's different approaches that customers take that I see all the time, which is an always-on environment. And there's ephemeral environments or dynamic environments that are spun up and spun down. And the approach around platform engineering is to ensure that what you have up and running is wrapped around with the security and the governance that you need, whether that's shrinking environments or wrapping policies around it. So that's a key component. And then ultimately the end result is the quality, right? Is building standardization on how you approach this. A lot of what we've talked about and Quality's talked about for 3 years is islands of automation. And islands of automation, there's teams that sit right next to each other that have different capabilities in terms of automating and really driving that automation percentage. 70, 80, 90% of it is getting automated, where other teams might not be as sophisticated or advanced. But this is a symbiotic relationship. And if you think about that lazy 8 in the DevOps world and the development world, be able to pass between different teams, different organizations, the microservices that have to come together across the organizations, that standardization really is becoming more and more important to make sure that quality end result is coming out at the end of it. And I think that's where platform engineering has really come on. I talked about early on as developers have kind of been given a free pass to go do whatever they need to do to go innovate. And it's created this world in some instances with teams that you build it, you run it, right? Which is great and created a lot of innovation, a lot of new approaches. But I think that we're starting to see that pendulum is becoming a challenge for that type of mentality now. Having them to be an operator of the infrastructure, an operator of all the tools, and be able to manage all that, and the skill set gaps between different people that are in those teams, whether that's onboarding or new people, starting to widen and starting to create some issues in terms of how they can run as fast as they can and the velocity about that. The other thing, around, people is really talent level, right? I mean, Google and Amazon and, Facebook or Meta or whatever you want to call them, they're getting, the top talent, right? They can pay for it. They can bring those people in, and they're getting that. But in the real world and in the rest of the world, we've got to, really build that core development team, that core institutional knowledge of understanding how to go work in the system that's been created, and really bring that to an efficient, consistent pattern that individuals can predict, can rely on, and be predictable in the outcomes of that. What we're seeing is that a lot of the kind of the DevOps that really have separated the DevOps from their IT teams become essentially that shadow operators or shadow IT that's running in the DevOps space, which is causing some issues in terms of how to really get to their core business level function, which is innovating and developing the software. That wasn't supposed to come up, but anyway, I've done a lot of research on this. Spent a lot of time going through webinars, participating in webinars, looking through Gartner's perspective on this. There's a whole lot of links I'll show you at the end that can give you another perspective on this. But really, what I have kind of pulled together and see consistently across different resources around what is platform engineering, what are the core components that it's trying to go drive. At the highest level, it's two things, and I mentioned this early on. It's really the user experience and productivity of those users, as well as the operational efficiencies, whether that's a DevOps team or an IT team or some hybrid in between. We talked about the skills gaps, having to bridge those skill gaps. We talked about one of the key qualities that you'll see consistently time and time again is the ability to self-serve, right? If I need infrastructure or I need environments to be able to do my job, I need to get access to it. I need it, when I need it to on my timelines. How do you create self-service? The other thing that's really starting to take hold is this kind of building blocks approach, this reusability of all of those that automation assets that are created, creating those golden paths or golden images, and wrapping with the governance and security, and how do you orchestrate all that in a simplified fashion. And then again, that consistency part is what is driving this as well, is really driving that consistency all the way through that process from end to end, whether it's your feature function test to your performance test to your end-to-end test. How do you build that consistency that when it gets to production, what you learned or what you built in pre-production is what you're going to expect to get when you get into production world. And this is not about losing creativity. This is not about how do I drive this into a square peg in a round hole. It's really giving that creativity or keeping that creativity, but building that consistency so you've got a predictable outcome when you go to production. So a couple key points with Gartner. Since they picked this up, it is on the top of the hype curve right now with Gartner's prediction and what they're saying that 80% of software companies are going to be adopting this type of strategy over the next couple of years, which is almost double what it was in 2022. So it's really starting to emerge as a strategy. This is not necessarily a particular product or one particular product. This is really a strategy, and how do you approach this to really take away that complexity and modernize your software tools and applications and architectures. I think that when I look at this architecture, it's bringing that infrastructure, it's bringing those configurations, the software packages, the software changes, the reusability, the tools like monitoring or other tools that might be in play here, and really creating it as a service to those users and those consumers of those environments. And those environments are complete environments needed to go do their job. whether that's the product teams, the services teams, and really giving that full visibility of what's happening and accountability across that. So with that, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. So that's just a quick overview of platform engineering. I'm gonna switch gears to kind of quality and quality's approach. And I need to kind of speed this up, but we've been in this business, like Frank said, for 10 plus years. And it's really been all around infrastructure, automation, and orchestration. And how do we go do that? And we are typically winning with customers that are reaching this point where their scale and velocity becomes a challenge. But what we're seeing is that is moving further and further down the stack in terms of the mid-market space, and really creating a frictionless, seamless way that you can deliver those environments and create those opportunities for your users to go innovate. I've got two examples that I'll go through quick. One is the largest bank in Israel, which is Bank Leumi. They've been a customer for about a year now. And I think this is a really good example of what platform engineering could look like in terms of all the pieces and parts, where you've got the infrastructure, whether it's whatever cloud that might be, whether it's on-premise with VMware or AWS, Google Azure. But you've also got pipelines, you've got the infrastructure components, you've got things like Backstage, Azure DevOps, and there's a lot of pieces to this. And how do we glue this together? And that's where quality comes into play, is really how do we glue this all together in a way that can deliver that service, or as a service to that user group. Another example that I'll give is that everybody can go look at today. Cisco DevNet is essentially a developer portal that they've created for their 750 plus thousand users, that anybody with social credentials can go log on right now and get access to the environments that they've curated and they've built for their user groups, whether that's internal or external, and can go develop on. And I'll give you a link to that at the end as well. But just to understand a little bit about what quality is doing, and then we'll get to a demo. If you think about all of those automation assets, how do we create those building blocks? So how do we manage those building blocks in a golden path or golden image way, right? Represent those building blocks in a way that now I can architect environments, very quickly, all the permutations, all the different requirements that the user groups comes up with. How do I put that in a self-service fashion? And then how do I give day two operations plus visibility and control and accountability across all of my environments that are being created? And really looking, today we're gonna really go through kind of how do we simplify the orchestration and creation of environments. We're going to talk about workflows. We're going to talk about governance and tagging, and then some of the reporting aspects, and we'll go into detail on that. But the outcomes that we're seeing are tremendous. Chris will be able to show a couple slides of actual data on kind of that last bullet, which is or the last two bullets really, the second two bullets, which is how do we control cloud costs? We had a customer that said, I didn't know if I'm spending 50% more than I needed to, 50% less than I needed to, or just right. When they brought us in, we're able to help them understand how they're using the cloud, who's using it, when, where, and how, to bring that accountability and an understanding of a complete environment perspective, not just a service that you're buying from AWS, like a VPC or an S3 bucket. It's how all that stitched together to form into an environment that's supporting a function. But it's also about how do we get those provisioning times so the users can get away from trying to operate, manage, and maintain those environments, and really get to the heart of what we really want them to go do, which is to go innovate. So last slide here, and then I'm gonna hand it over. There's a couple really good articles from Gartner that if you're interested in understanding more about this, that you can go to, and this will be all available. There's also a platformengineering.org, PlatformCon. You've got information from Quality and Phase Specific as well. If you want to go look at it live at the user experience, then you can go to Cisco DevNet today and go see that. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Chris, and we'll jump into the demo, and appreciate it. Chris?
Yeah, if you don't mind, stop sharing.
Yep. There we go.
All right, thanks, Jason, and thanks again, guys, for setting this up, and thanks everyone else for attending. Again, my name is Chris Fox. I'm a DevOps engineer over at Quali. So as Jason was kind of saying, we're kind of in the next iteration of where technology is going. So originally it was just VMs being managed either on-prem or, pretty prematurely in the cloud. Then it came to IAC and configuration management using tools like Terraform, Chef, Ansible, Puppet. And then now we're kind of in that next stage where we have all these tools that are effectively deploying our environments, but we really don't have control over where those environments are living, who's managing them, who's making sure they're being cleaned up, most importantly. So we're kind of that next step of evolution. We're the layer on top of the IAC, on top of the configuration management tools, that kind of wraps it all together and gives you like a single pane of glass view of what's going on in your cloud environments, regardless of where your resources are existing. So these could be on-premise, these could be on AWS, GCP, Azure, doesn't matter. It's where the IAC or the configuration management lives. So right now, you're looking at our kind of base screen, just for a little bit of context. Our idea is everything has its kind of own different space. So let me take a step back real quick. We're going to have a few different sessions kind of covering this. This one we typically do from like the user perspective and then go to the maintainer perspective, the people designing the blueprints, the people maintaining the product or the platform as a service. Instead, we're going to be jumping into how we're going to be designing all of this, how we're going to be maintaining it, how you're going to be controlling your users to make sure once they do have kind of keys to building all of this stuff, that they're not running wild, running up costs, deploying things that could be dangerous, opening up things like public S3 buckets, kind of like nightmare scenarios. So just so you understand, there's a few things that we're kind of glossing over, probably talking about it in the next session. So first thing I want to talk about, just for a little bit more context, is the whole idea of spaces. So as you can see here, in our product, we have a couple different spaces that are available as a full admin. So in these spaces, it's like kind of a logical separation. It could be different applications. It could be different departments, different users. It could even be, the different stages. So it could be dev, staging, prod for different applications, depending on what they have access to. So it's just kind of a way to segregate out your environment in a way that makes sense. So when we first get into Torque, we're going to onboard a repository. So it'll typically be something like this, where it's just, a random Git repository or something else. It doesn't have, it can be like GitLab, GitHub, and things like Bitbucket. And it'll just be like a repository of different assets. So as you can see here, there's no real like folder structure that it's being adhered to. I'm just kind of going down, looking at different things. And I can see here, I have an Ubuntu VM, bare bones simple. It's just got, a couple resources, a provider block, some outputs and variables that I'm providing for it. But none of this has to be structured. This can all just be digested. So what's going to happen is I can onboard that repo. And then once I onboard that repo, I can go ahead and discover those assets. So as you can see here, I can quickly go ahead and look for all the things that were discovered. And you see it's multiple technologies as well. So it's not just Terraform. It's also Helm. It's also Kubernetes manifest, Ansible playbooks, CloudFormation templates. So any kind of major IAC that's being supported, we can automatically go out and digest those. So to make it easy on myself, I'm just going to search for it. And I'm going to generate that blueprint. And it'll generate it. It'll be really small to read right there. So I'm just going to hit finish on that. What it's going to do is drop me into my blueprint view. And I'm going to quickly search for that one again that I just created. And then what it'll do is put this into our configuration. So again, it's another YAML file that's wrapping all of this. With any other kind of platform tool, there's going to be some layer of wrapping. Now, be it UI, be it another, YAML or some type of syntax language to kind of control that you're not going to get away from it. So there is going to be an additional layer of configuration. Now, there are some tools that integrate directly into the language, but then you're limited into that IAC tool. So if you're buying all into Terraform, maybe you can get away with using something like, with like Terragrunt or something like that. But when you're wanting to move to other tools like Helm or CloudFormation, you're going to want some kind of generic wrapper that can go over all of those tools. So as you can see, it adjusted that. It brought in my variables as inputs, and then it brought all my outputs as outputs. We can hard code these values. We can parameterize these values. We can make these values a list of inputs. We can kind of control everything that's going on inside there. So we can decide what the user has access to manipulate and control, and what is something that we don't even want them to see, that we want them to have as a set value, depending on the space, depending on the account, depending on the specific blueprint in this case. And then obviously we have our grain, which is just our different way of building all these together. So our blueprints can have multiple grains. It can also have other blueprints as individual grains. And each one of these grain pieces is just a different piece of technology. So it could be one Terraform module. I could have a Terraform module that builds like an EKS cluster. And then I could have a Helm chart grain right underneath that goes out and deploys an application on my brand new EKS cluster. It could be something as simple as deploying my Ubuntu VM and then, deploying an Ansible playbook on the VM once it's available. So for right now, it's just kind of our lowest base block. And we can launch this and build an environment right away, or we can start adding that to other blueprints to kind of start growing that, reaching that kind of golden path that Jason was talking about earlier. So right now I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to kind of look and see. I'm going to first add this to my asset library so I can use it later. And then I'm going to see if I have anything around networking. So I have a virtual network. I don't really know what quite what that does, so if that helps me or not. So I'm going to build something from scratch. So I'm going to say, basic network with AWS to use with my Ubuntu VM. So you can see here, I have a whole asset library. Now these are things that I'm pulling in. I can pull from our community. I can also build these myself and publish them inside of it. So first thing I'm going to look for is a VPC. I really don't see anything there. So I'm going to go and see if there's anything available. Look at my AWS asset library and I see there is a VPC. So what I can do with this guy is add it to my asset library. Now what it's going to do is take a copy of that Terraform module, build a blueprint similar to the way that we just did that with the repository onboarding, and then make that available. So now I can go ahead and edit this blueprint if I want to make any modifications to it, make it less or more customizable. But anyway, I can just quickly add that in. Now what I want is probably some security groups. So I'm going to add 2 of these guys. And then I'm going to want to connect those up. So I'm going to make these guys dependent on my VPC. And then you can see here I have some invalid inputs. So I'm going to quickly select these guys, see what's going on. Now I have the option, I can make these hard-coded values, or I can make those as user-defined values. In this case, I'm going to make them user-defined. Now again, I'm just going to provide some random values for the name. But now I need the VPC ID. I know it's going to be coming from this guy. So I can go back to him, look at the outputs, look around and see it has a lot of outputs available. But I can see now that I have my VPC ARN. What I need is my VPC ID. So I can see that value, go back here, scroll back to the top real quick, and then start typing out that output. It's going to come up as an option. I don't want the default, I want the VPC ID. Not save, and then I'll have one last option to configure for the bare minimum. And again, I'll just use the input for that. Same kind of thing for this guy, basically identical. SQ2, and then I'll search for that VPC ID and throw it in there. So now I have a base network thing. So this is kind of the idea of now I have a building block that I can easily reuse across different blueprints, across different deployments. This is a known good product that I can reuse, and then I need to make any changes to it, talk about in the future about how we can pin this to specific commits, to specific spaces. That way I'm not making changes to an underlying blueprint that's going to break everyone else's blueprint. So let me save those changes, and then we'll generate a basic network AWS service here in a second. So I got that going, and I'm going to go ahead and create another new blueprint. So let me add that asset in. And then we'll just call Ubuntu network. Create that guy. Now, that was a little bit tedious, so let's make it a little easier through the power of AI. So I'm going to generate a new blueprint, and I want to say use basic network AWS with free Ubuntu VMs. You can see I'm not putting good grammar there. I'm not even capitalizing stuff. I just need to have those basic words in there, the basic syntax. It's going to go off to our backend AI language model, use that, and then build it. So obviously I kind of go in and ask it what's 10 plus 10, but anything related to torque, it'll take those in and automatically spin those up. And then again, if I wanted to go in and add anything to this, I could quickly go in and say, like, maybe I want to add, let's say, like Redis and Apache. So this gives me a very quick way to have AI go out there, create everything that I need to do once I have those assets available, connect it all up for me, because it understands the dependencies between stuff. And then it gives me that blueprint to use later on. So it's a very quick and effective way of you set up the kind of base building blocks, make those available to your user, and then they kind of run off and build what they need to build in a controlled, guarded situation. So now you can see right now that I can go in and look at the blueprint YAML. I see I have a bunch of new grains down here, and these are all showing the different things. I have the correct dependencies set up, pulling in inputs from the right places. So that's a really quick and easy way for you to effectively and efficiently have your users be building environments instead of waiting on you to go out and say, hey, I need to add in a new database, or I need to add in a new security group. They're going out and making those changes on their own in a controlled manner. Now, let's say we're getting a little scared what's going on out there. So let's say they're deploying the wrong regions, or they're deploying public S3 buckets, and we want to have an extra layer of control. This is where policies come in. So what we have the ability to ingest are OPA, so Open Policy Agent, Rego files, which allow us to go out and manage what's going on inside of Torque and what's going on inside of Terraform. So again, we have these policy repositories. Again, they can be in any kind of format. So we have two different types: environment, which is specific to Torque, Terraform, which is generic. They're named this just for ease of readability, but they can be in any kind of format. They could just be sitting at the root for all we care. So you see here, we have a couple ones for AWS, and we have different ones for private S3 allowed regions. So these are our built-in ones, but you can bring in your own repositories, apply your own policies to the environment or to the Terraform that's being ran. So right now I can go down here, quickly see that I have AWS allowed regions, and I have that triggered only to one specific space. I could get more specific. I could only do it against specific blueprints. I could do it across the entire account if I wanted to. So it's as granular as you want it to be. But for right now, I want to keep this to EU West 1, and I want to turn that guy on. So what I'm going to do is go to our live space, go to our blueprint catalog. Again, we'll go over all this later to kind of show off what's going on. I'm going to search for a web game on S3. This is going to try to launch in the US West 1 region, which is not allowed because we're only allowing EU West. And I'm going to go ahead and launch that guy. So this will take a second to launch. It's going to try to go out and build out different things inside of there. We'll come to that back in a second. While that's launching, what I want to show you guys is another important aspect of what's going on in Torque, and that's the tagging and tracking. So when we launch an environment, in this case, we already have one with the exact same stuff. You can see here, the policy wasn't active, so everything went according to plan. So we have a S3 web app. This is creating an S3 bucket using introspection, which we'll go over more details later. I can see exactly what resources are being created. What we're doing is making sure that everything's tagged. So the important thing for us is cost, tracking, seeing what's out there and making sure resources that I'm looking at in my cloud accounts or on-prem environments are easy to understand and easy to digest exactly what's going on. So everything that we're creating, every one of these resources that supports tags, will get these default tags out of the box, and then these custom tags that are specific to your own account, your own space, can be customized again by the blueprint, by the environment, by any kind of those levels. So again, we can take these guys, use them, and then it becomes very easy. So if I'm going on my AWS account, if I'm looking at S3, it's expired. Sorry, 1 second. Good deal. I'm back in now. So I'll go to S3 buckets real quick. And just for quickness, I'm looking at the creation date. See this web bucket that I was looking at earlier. Go to properties. Now, if I really don't understand why this exists, or say this is something way more expensive, like a bare metal instance or an EKS cluster, or some other ungodly large piece of resource or equipment, I can go in, look at the tags. I can see exactly who launched it, what space it came from, what blueprint, and what environment. So I know exactly who to track down, who to go talk to when something's out there for a long period of time or something very unusual is going on. I don't have to dig through CloudTrail logs. I don't need to look at all that extra data to understand that. So while we're waiting for that, let's go back. And now you can see that this environment failed, just to kind of follow up on the policy stuff. So you can see through our logging, we'll go over all this more detail in the next meeting, but just over our logging with the Terraform. So we got through the prepare to the plan step, and then we hit the plan validation. It sees that we're trying to use US OS 1. The only allowed region is EU West 1. So it blocked the deployment of this. So it's another layer of control. I didn't even have to worry about someone going out and launching this in the incorrect region. It's already applied to everything in that space. So if someone built this, overrode one of my inputs, and tried to do something fishy, or maybe they injected like a null resource that's running like a weird script, I can block all that stuff using OPA, and then I'm off the hook, and then it's being taken care of by Torque when it's being deployed like this. So real quick, going back to tagging. So now that we have all those tags and all that reporting, what we can do is go ahead and look at the different reports. So every space has its own cost and activity, but we can also go into the overall views. So activity is just the general kind of checking of what's being launched, spaces are being used, what blueprints are being actively monitored. It's a great way to see, you know, what's being used most frequently, what needs to be kind of upkept, and then what environments maybe aren't being used at all, and they can kind of fade away. Also see what users are doing. If someone's launching stuff for out there that's for a really long time, like David launched this for 1,500 hours. So maybe I need to go talk to that guy and see what's going on with his environments, why things are being running forever. Could have a good reason, but if I'm looking at this in a console view, like in AWS or Azure, really don't have the understanding. I may be able to go back and see the creation date, but at the same time, I don't have the context of the full environment of like, hey, is this an application? Is this some underlying infrastructure like an AWS account that's going to be used forever? So it does have a good reason to stay up for this long. That's what we're providing, is that extra layer of context. And then quickly, we also have the ability to look at cost. So this is real live cost data. We're pulling this directly from your cloud provider, AWS, Azure, GCP, Cube cost from Kubernetes. So this is real cost data. This is not stuff we're making up. We're pulling this down, we're correlating it to the environment. And then again, this is by the environment. So we're not looking at individual resources like a couple instances or like an entire cluster. This is everything that's being launched. So if I'm spinning up an environment that has 3 VMs for the front end, 3 VMs for the back end, 2 RDS databases. That's all being cataloged as one environment and one cost. So if I go back to my spaces and look at my environment catalog, and let's go back to the live space. You can see here, there under some of these, there's cost. So this is the real, after these launch a couple times, they'll pull down that data. And this is the real life cost of what it takes to actually launch that. So real quick, I know we're running kind of short on time right now, but just to show you kind of the effect of that cost analysis and control. So these are some real numbers from some of our customers for realized savings. So using our workflows, using our kind of AI insights into what's going on with your environments, you can see here that our cloud costs are pretty high, but our savings are even higher. So we've saved customers on average over 50% of their cloud cost spend, because we're pointing out these environments that are running all day, that are running for weeks, that are being forget to shut down. So it's not only control over, what's going on actively, we're actually controlling when environments are being spun up and spun down, the resources in the environments, we can turn those off using workflows, which will go into more detail next time. But it's a really powerful tool to make sure that you're getting the most out of your resources when they're actually being utilized, and you're getting that cost savings back when they're not being utilized. So I hope that was kind of a good kind of brief introduction onto like how that kind of golden path kind of worked. So right now, I think we'll turn it over to any kind of questions you guys may have.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so let's see. I'm just going to unmute. So your mics are now can be unmuted for those who wish to ask any questions. Perhaps I'll kick off with a question just to get the conversation going. So is Talk, what you've described about Talk, is it replacing IAC tools such as Terraform and CloudFormation to build infrastructure?
That's a great question. So no, the short answer is no. We're not replacing those tools. We're kind of that level above it. Just the same way that when Terraform came in, it wasn't replacing VMware or AWS. I mean, those products definitely try to bring up their own tools to kind of compete with Terraform. But we're a layer on top of Terraform. Same in the way with like Terraform Cloud is trying to do what we do, just not as well, not as fully featured. So we're a layer on top of these IAC assets that allow you to have more control, more visibility, and expand the functionality and allow you to combine those disparate IAC assets. So short answer is no. But thank you.
Right. And it's really from a user perspective, trying to create that one-click ability to go launch all of the different assets, all the different Terraform files, and orchestrate that in a way that creates that complete entire environment for those users.
Okay, thank you. All right. Does anyone else in the audience have any other questions? I've got a couple of others, but I'll just give someone else an opportunity. You should now be able to, someone's sent a chat. How is Talk priced? Good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's two ways that we approach this. One is more of an enterprise pricing agreement approach. So customers that are wanting to make this part of their strategy, there's capacity that you can buy, whether that's either concurrent environments, so the number of environments that are running, or we can look at even potentially users. Just really depends on how the customer is structured and what their understanding of how their usage of their environments are today. The other way to do this in a kind of let's test it out to see how it works, we do have a pay-as-you-go option. So if whatever you're launching, there's micropayments for it, and you can pay as you go, and then as it becomes more ingrained as part of the strategy, then if you want to at a reduced rate by more of an enterprise style agreement, then those are options that we can move to in that process.
Okay, thank you. Have a look there. I have one which is of interest to me, and that revolves around AI. You demonstrated AI implemented within Chalk, and I was curious to see or hear your opinion in terms of how AI may have an impact overall on the concept of platform engineering.
Yeah, I'll let Jason give his thoughts as well, but from my perspective, I think I kind of see it as a great assistant. So, I mean, obviously, we'll still probably need at some level people who understand the complexities of the environments that they're building. We'll need to understand the different building blocks and um, how those different environments work together. But at the end of the day, as you kind of saw, once you have those pieces in place, it allows users who don't really have that understanding, but the background kind of does, the AI kind of does, to allow those people to connect those things together. So I think it will be like a multiplier, like a workplace multiplier. Less people can do more, but at the end of the day, I don't think it'll be a total replacement in the near future.
Okay. I mean, I think about it really in two ways: is how's the product going to evolve to include AI, and as Chris showed, we're bringing those elements in and testing those elements where I think a lot of people are trying to understand how to use AI to really streamline efficiencies and velocity. And we're taking that approach with our product as well. So there's more to come. We'll see more adoption of AI in our product. From an AI perspective, from an environment perspective, all of the things that we talked about in terms of building control, building the ability to go launch AI environments, they're very, very costly environments, and bringing that control, you're going to have sensitive data a lot of times in those environments. Making sure that the wrapped around it, it's going to be even more important, or as a function inside of businesses to make sure that it's launched in a controlled fashion. So if you want to hear more about what we're doing around that specifically, we've got demos that we can present and show how we're approaching that specifically from a strategy in terms of company strategy using AI, and how we can use Torque to go manage the environments that are for those purposes.
Thank you. All right. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, there's another question that popped up. What's the difference between platform engineering and cloud management platforms? Chris, you want to take that one? I'll take the second half of that one.
Yeah, so I think from the outside, they look very similar. I think cloud management platforms do a very good job of managing specific resources and having a very narrow scope of what's being kind of deployed out there. But I think the idea with platform engineering, and what we even see with our competitors, is we're not looking at each individual resource. We're looking at it as the environment as a whole. So if an environment is only made up as one individual resource, I mean, we can obviously still track that and have that individual piece. But what we're interested in is deploying everything developer or an end user would need to have an effective environment, that be it like usually like an application, could be an AWS account vending, could be any kind of piece of that, as opposed to like a CMP, which they're more focused on the nitty-gritty pieces. So a little bit same but different.
Yeah, I think from platform engineering versus IDP or internal developer portals, really that those first two slides that I showed, platform engineering is all the above, right? Which the internal developer portals typically are focused on just the DevOps stack. Where quality is really bringing all of those elements together and stitching it, and it's really creating that glue. We've got customers that are using quality as really the internal developer portal, but there's some nuances around what's the DevOps tool stack in terms of release management, version controls and stuff like that, that kind of starts to move into more of the developer portal side of the world that we can start to stitch together, and bring that infrastructure and that infrastructure world and the developer tool stack world together and start to connect those. And that's really what platform engineering approach is connecting all the way through the complete environment.
When we look at platform engineering, I mean, we talk about environments as a service, and I know the DevNet is a very good example. Would you like to maybe just, for those that are not too familiar with DevNet, just to give a thumbnail description on how they use environment as a service, and therefore, obviously, that's tied back into talk.
Yeah, sure. So Cisco's been a customer of ours for many years. Cisco DevNet's been around for quite some time. We have two products, one that's really been focused more on the physical infrastructure, traditional networking, which we call Cloud Shell. What they have done is they've moved to more of the everything is code world, which is more around IACs, the Ansibles, the Terraforms, Cloud Formations, and stuff like that. The OPAs, or open policy agents. I mean, those are, everything is code. And what Cisco's done is they've moved everything to code, or they're in the process of doing that. So now the platform in terms of DevNet itself is on Torque. The use cases that they've got, there's quite a few different use cases. There's networking new gear testing. There's operating system testing that they have out there as well. You can create applications on top of their gear by accessing their infrastructure. And really the whole genesis around DevNet was, they were shipping gear to customers worldwide to go develop on and create or buy, test and validate new product, develop on new product. And, they were losing track of all of that inventory. And so what they decided to do is that, we're going to create a super portal that they all can get access to that in a self-service fashion, and to go do those same functions, but do it in a centralized fashion, a standardized fashion, that they've got a lot more control over of how they can give access and reduce that cost of shipping out demo gears.
Thank you. Question: as Talk is a SaaS product, how do you communicate with secure and air-gapped environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a couple customers who actually, so we have AWS GovCloud customers, we have bank customers. So we have a couple customers that use our product on premise. So for most people that are using Torque, the SaaS is good enough. But for whatever reason, you guys need that capability to run things in your own private cloud or in your own data center. We do have packages available, albeit at a little bit of higher cost, to run Torque in your environment. But for the day-to-day, even with like GovCloud environments where it's totally air-gapped, all the communication that happens is we have an agent that sits out there and it does egress communication traffic back to the SaaS platform. So nothing is ever coming into your environment, everything is going out. And as long as that communication is allowed, we can make that connection and do any kind of configuration. So even if you're using our full public SaaS offering and you have data centers around the world on vCenter, we can still run Torque in those environments using our agent.
Okay, thank you. So we're just about close to the hour. Are there any last final questions from anyone? No? So look, perhaps we can wrap up at this point. So I wanted to firstly, last question that comes in. Okay, quick one. How does quality ensure security and compliance in sandbox environments?
You want to take that one?
Yeah.
You let me take that one?
Yeah. Like that.
Well, I think that there's, our system is governed by a full RBAC system. We can also use SSO if we need to. So we've got, the users, in those spaces, by defining those spaces, we define the users that have access to those spaces. We can do a lot of things around policies in terms of, how many can be launched. Put the policies like Chris showed in terms of, where you can launch it. But we can also do other things like, you can't launch more than a certain amount of VMs. There's a lot of capability we've got to make sure that it is as secure to meet the security team requirements. Trish, you want to add
Okay,
anything to
thank you.
that?
I think what you just said, I mean, we can control who can launch what kind of roles they have access to. So they're assuming a role like in an AWS account, you can limit the role that what it has access to, which roles they have access to based on space, based off environment. And then we can do things with like secure storage and secret management. So we have a couple of different ways. And then obviously we have all the 3-letter compliances, PCI, SOX, all that good stuff. So if there's any kind of requirements around there, we have most, if not all, of those kind of certifications.
Hopefully that answers the question. So look, we will wrap up at this point, and the recording will be available to all of you. We're happy to also make the slides that were presented. I know towards the last page there were some great resources for those that wish to look more into platform engineering and also into talk. You're always welcome to contact me directly. So there will be some contacts also associated within that slide pack as well. If anyone wants any material on the topic, on the product, you're more than welcome. So firstly, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Chris, very much for being on this webinar for us, based over there in the US. I know it's probably getting towards late evening for some of you. For those that have attended locally, thank you very much for your attendance, for your questions. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar that we run. Thank you.
Yeah. Right, you stop the recording.